What's up guys, I'm doing another video this evening. So yesterday was the 22nd of March 2017, and it was the anniversary of a unfortunate terrorist attack which happened on Westminster Bridge 8 years ago on the 22nd of March 2017. People may remember what happened that day. In a terrorist named Khalid Massoud drove his car across Westminster Bridge, rammed into several people on the bridge. One woman was actually thrown off the bridge into the River Thames. Um, One guy was actually thrown off the bridge and landed on a walkway underneath the bridge. They both died. The woman that fell into the Thames and the guy that was thrown off the bridge and landed on the walkway underneath the bridge. They both died from their injuries. And several more people were injured. A police officer named P.C.E. Palmer, he was stabbed and killed in the grounds of Parliament. Obviously, he was trying to stop Khalid Massoud from entering the House of Parliament, and he stabbed. He got stabbed, unfortunately, and then obviously the armed police shot Khalid Massoud dead in the grounds of Parliament, um, basically bringing an end to his reign of terror, stopping him from being able to claim any more lives that day, which is, I'm glad they did that. Um, Obviously that's why. If you, so obviously we know that obviously that attack would be one of several unfortunate terrorist incidents that happened in the UK that year. And obviously 2 months later we had the suicide bombing at the Manchester Arena, and obviously a few weeks after that we had obviously the terrorist attack at London Bridge, and obviously around Barrymore hit, and then obviously we had an incident. I think it was in August that year, or no, I think it was in either August or September that year. A boy tried to detonate a bomb on a train that passes on a tube train at District Line train at Parsons Green tube station, but the bomb didn't go off properly, but people were still injured in that incident. But this one at Westminster, obviously was terrible. 5 people lost their lives, including a police officer, Heath Palmer, who was stabbed by the attacker. Um, Obviously, there's actually a picture online of him that was taken with a picture of him, and it was taken about 45 minutes before the incident happened. Very, very eerie. I remember, I think it was around about 3 in the afternoon. Because I know I got back here just after it happened. I mean, obviously we had to, normally we would go through Rotherhithe. I was at Cavendish, which is over in South, Cavendish Store, which is over in South London, and near, sorry, Heath. And normally we would go through the Rotherhithe Tunnel, but the Rotherhithe Tunnel was shut that day because there'd been some sort of an incident in the Rotherhithe Tunnel that day and it was closed. So we had to go a completely different way that day, and obviously we did go near Westminster, but we had to go a completely different way that day, and it took me a bit longer to get home. Um, and obviously I got back, and I think it just happened around the time I got back. As I finished all at 3, and I got in at Ham, and then got back here. I think it was around half 3, quarter to 4, and it just happened around that time. Um, Obviously that attack is why that incident and the incident at London Bridge is why if you've ever been on if you guys have ever been across um, Westminster Bridge or London Bridge or any of the other road bridges here in London, and especially in central London, they have the barriers going right the way along the bridge, along the bridges. Those barriers are there because of what happened 8 years ago, in which obviously the terrorist attacks happened at Westminster along the bridge, and obviously in which vehicles were driven across the bridge, and they were and obviously they ran into people on the bridge. Those barriers have been put there to stop vehicles from being able to mount the pavements and things like that. which is what happened in these attacks. The vehicles mounted the pavements and drove along the pavements and rammed into people, um, which is obviously very sad to think about what happened. And that is obviously why those barriers are there now. Though, and obviously they don't right across the bridges to stop vehicles from being able to gain access to being able to mount the pavements and obviously injure any pedestrians on the bridges after what happened years ago, obviously 8 years ago. I was thinking about that. Obviously when I think about that day, I mean, you think about it. There were obviously people up on the London Eye who will obviously seen that happening that below them, and they were probably thinking like, what the fuck just happened? What the fuck have we just witnessed? Because they would have had to witness that for that whole thing unfold. They would have seen that van coming across the bridge. The ironic coming across the bridge, ramming into people on the bridge, and then those people must be thinking like, what the actual fuck have I just witnessed? Obviously, I feel for anyone who was affected by those events that happened that day, and obviously, my thoughts are with the families of those who lost their lives that day, including the police officer, Hugh Palmer, who left behind a wife and daughter. It must have been, it's sad when you think about him that day. He went into work that day blissfully unaware of what was going to happen that day. His wife has been left without her husband, and his daughter his little girl's been left without her dad. And it's tragic to think about. They would never have thought that he was gonna leave that day and not come home alive, not come home again. Even they would never have thought that when he left for work that morning, they were never gonna see him alive again. It's just it was an unbelievable, event to happen that day, and unfortunately, it was one of what ended up being at least 3 or 4 different terrorist incidents that we had in the UK that year. Obviously, we all know that tragically, just a couple of months later, we had the horrible events that took place. Obviously, with the suicide bombing at the Manchester Arena at the end of the Ariana Grande concert. Then obviously just a couple of weeks after that we had the terrorist attack at London Bridge and Borough Market. So yeah, it was obviously a tough year that year, and I mean, it's just I mean, it must have been surreal, for those people that were there that day, and obviously, still, obviously would have, I hope that the people that were injured in that incident have been able to make full recoveries and haven't been left with any kind of lasting effects from that day. It was a horrible, horrible day. The 22nd of March, 2017. I forgot yesterday was the anniversary of the Westminster terrorist attack. I was meant to do this video yesterday, but it completely slipped my mind, to be quite honest. But yeah, obviously 8 years ago today, or 8 years ago yesterday, we had that unfortunate attack, and as I said, that is why you have the barriers now going right across the bridges, like they go right, obviously, and that is, as I said, is to stop vehicles from being able to mount the bridges. Some of you guys may never have known. Some of you guys may have gone across those bridges and may have wondered, well, why are those barriers there? Well, now those barriers were put there after what happened at Westminster and London Bridge. Those barriers were were put there and were put on the other bridges to stop vehicles from being able to mount the pavements and to avoid a repetition of what happened obviously in March and June of 2017. Because before 2017, before those incidents happened, there never used to be the barriers on the bridges. They weren't there. Because there was no reason to have them. They were only put there after what happened, obviously, in March and June of 2017, when obviously the hire and the van were driven across the bridges, and obviously they rammed into people on the bridges. Now, that would obviously be a lot less harder to do that, because obviously vehicles can't access mount the pavements now, because there are barriers there that that stop them from doing that. And it's not a bad thing really that they did put the barriers there, and at least pedestrians will be a little bit more reassured, and will know that they'll be a bit safer now, obviously walking across the bridges, and knowing that vehicles can't mount the pavement to ram into them anymore, ram into them now, because the barriers will stop them from doing that. And I think it gives you that sense of relief, in knowing that those barriers are there, and obviously vehicles can't mount, the pavements anymore, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. To be honest, I was shocked by what happened that day. I was shocked. It was an act of the only way to there's not really a good way to describe it or a positive way to describe it. The only way to describe the events that happened that day was an act of pure evil. That is what it was. It was an act of pure evil, and an act of pure. It was one. It was vital. What happened that day, and how people's lives were turned upside down that day, Um, and as I said, my thoughts go out to all of those that were affected by Westminster, by the events at Westminster, and also by to those whose lives were affected by the other incidents that happened that year. Um, and also, obviously, to my thoughts with those who lost their lives, who lost people they love in attack that day. I mean, I imagine that the 22nd of March 2017, 2020, 22nd of March is always a very kind of painful reminder for those that were involved in the incident that day, and those that were injured that day, and obviously for the loved ones of those who passed, who were killed in that incident. Basically, that is the thing. They were murdered. They didn't. It wasn't. They didn't pass away. They did pass away, but they were murdered. Well, let's put that. But yeah, that's why I would give my thoughts on that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. So today, and I'll see you in another one tomorrow. Bye bye.